Veuillez-vous lever? The International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia is now in session. L'audience du tribunal pénal international pour l'ex-Yougoslavie est ouverte.
The case of the prosecutor of the tribunal against Dusan Tadic, also known as Dule, and Goran Borovnica, case IT 94-1 and IT 95-3. 94-1 and IT 95-3.
Thank you. Good morning. May I have the appearances, please, for the prosecutor?
Your Honour, please, my name is Neiman. I appear for the prosecution, and with me is Mr. Tiga, Ms. Hollis, who is not here today, Mr. Fenrick, and Mr. Keegan of counsel.
Thank you, Mr. Neiman. And who is appearing for the defense, please?
My name, Mr. President, is Vladimirov, and also here is Mr. Vujin. We both are the lawyers in this case, and we are assisted by Ms. Feddes, Ms. Starreveld, Mr. Collin, and Mr. van der Does de Villebois. They are assisting the defense on matters of facts.
Fine, thank you, Mr. Vladimirov. One additional comment, Mr. Vladimirov. I understand that Mr. Tadic has completed an initial application for appointment of counsel.
That's right.
And that he has indicated, has selected rather, you as his first choice to represent him, and the registrar has appointed you as counsel. Is that your understanding?
That's correct.
Fine, okay. Now you'll then be acting, so to speak, as lead counsel for the defense. That means that the tribunal will send you notices, and send you notices as well, Mr. Vuying. But we will be looking to you to tell us that you have received the notices, Mr. Vladimirov.
For practical reasons, that will be a very good idea.
Very good. And that also goes for the prosecutor, Mr. Prosecutor.
Yes.
You would then, of course, send notices to Mr. Vladimirov and of course, to Mr. Vuying, but except Mr. Vladimirov as, and pardon me if I'm stumbling over
Don't
the
worry about that.
pronunciation. Mr. Vladimirov as the lead counsel. Do you understand that, Mr. Neiman?
I understand that, Your Honour.
Very good. Thank you. Now, is the prosecutor ready to proceed?
Your Honour, the prosecution is ready to proceed with the case against Tadic, the accused Tadic. In relation to the accused Borovnica, also mentioned in the indictment, a warrant for his arrest has been issued, but he's still at large. Accordingly, unless he's arrested in the immediate future, we wish to proceed to trial against the accused Tadic at this stage.
Is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes.
Fine. And for the record then, Mr. Borovnica is not present today. Just Mr. Dusan Tadic. Is that correct, Mr. Vladimirov?
That's correct.
Fine, thank you. Mr. Vladimirov, would you rise a moment? I'd like to speak to you. Has Mr. Tadic received a copy of the indictment?
He has, Mr. President.
And has Mr. Tadic read the indictment or had it read to him in a language he understands?
He did read it in his native language.
Have you discussed the indictment with Mr. Tadic?
Not extensively, but just a global discussion has been made.
Do you believe that Mr. Tadic understands the nature of the charges contained in the indictment?
I think he understands the nature of the charges.
Okay, and I see, Mr. Wu Ying, you're nodding your head as well.
Yes.
Okay, fine, thank you. Is Mr. Tadish ready to proceed with the reading of the indictment for the purposes of entering a plea, or would he be willing to waive the reading of the indictment?
Well, he's willing to waive without any prejudice to the contents of it, but he doesn't need to have the indictment read extensively in full.
Okay, when I say waive, I don't mean waive any of his rights to plead not guilty to the indictment.
That's exactly what I'm referring to.
Just not a formal reading of the indictment.
That's right.
Very good. Mr. Tadic, would you please stand? For the record, would you state your full name, please, as well as any other names that you may have gone by?
Moje ime je Duško Tadić.
And are there any other names that you have gone by, Mr. Tadic? Can you hear, or is there?
Okay. Dobro.
Dobro, ali ništa me ne pita.
Andere namen?
Okay.
Drugo,
Mr. Tadic, for the record, would you state your full name?
ne razumijem engleski jezik, ja govorim srpski jezik I razumijem srpski jezik.
I don't understand English. I only understand the Serbian language, and I only speak the Serbian language.
Okay.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Tadic?
Ja sam rekao ne razumijem engleski jezik.
I already said that I don't understand the English language. I don't have an interpretation.
Yes.
Sada.
Okay. Mr. Tadic, for the record, would you state your full name?
Moje puno ime I prezime Duško Tadić.
And have you gone by any other names, Mr. Tadic?
Ja nisam upotrebljavao,
I never
osim
used
što su me
any
najbliži prijatelji
other
ponekad
names
zvali
except
Dule.
my closest friends sometimes called me Dule.
Fine, thank you. Mr. Tadic, are you ready to enter a plea to the indictment?
Da, spreman.
Yes,
How do you plead to the indictment, guilty or not guilty?
Nisam kriv I nisam učestvovao
not
ni u jednom od
guilty,
djela koja mi su
and I never
stavljena
took
teret.
part in any of the crimes with which I'm charged.
And I understand then that by pleading not guilty, you are pleading guilty to each and every of the charges contained in the indictment. Is that correct?
Nisam učestvovao ni u
guilty.
jednoj od tačaka
I didn't take part in any of the crimes with which I'm charged.
You're pleading not guilty to each of the charges. Is that correct?
Da.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Tadic, you may be seated. Thank you. Now, are there any preliminary matters that we need to discuss, lawyers, before we determine a date for trial? First, the prosecutor, are there any preliminary matters, preliminary motions that you intend on filing?
Yes, Your Honour. We will be seeking to file one motion so that there may be a hearing under Rule 75B of the rules in relation to the taking of evidence by sexual assault victims who have been sexually assaulted and who we propose will give evidence in these proceedings. We suggest that we would be in a position to file our papers in this matter by about the 18th of May, if that is a convenient date for the tribunal, with the matter then proceeding to a hearing at some subsequent date after that. The situation is, Your Honour, that some of these witnesses that we seek to rely on are at the moment unable to bring themselves to give evidence in the traditional manner. So we would be seeking to rely on the provisions of 75B of the rules in order to overcome that issue. At the moment, that is the only preliminary motion that the prosecution wishes to identify.
Do you contemplate that you would require a hearing for that motion?
Your Honour, it may be that the tribunal would be assisted by a short hearing. I imagine that we would file a fairly detailed documentary motion, but that the specific rule itself, 75B, seems to contemplate some sort of hearing, and we have in mind at this stage, and I must say it's not settled, but we have in mind calling perhaps some evidence by experts in this field who may be able to assist the tribunal with resolution of the question. So to that extent there may be a necessity for a hearing.
Fine, thank you, Mr. Neiman. Mr. Vladimirov, suppose we give you until, I'm trying to count the dates here, until the 2nd of June. I think that would be about 14 days. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I don't think that will be enough, Mr. President.
No, I just want to get the response. How much time do you think that you would need, Mr. Vladimirov?
Yes, well, I think 2 weeks more would be convenient for the defense.
2 weeks in addition to the,
That's right.
the 14 days?
Yeah.
So that would then get us to about June 18th, I suppose.
That's right.
That's a Sunday.
Sunday, well.
90.
I would rather...
Actually, I was thinking about pushing it back the other way, only because, of course, I haven't seen the motion, and neither have you.
No.
So you don't really know whether you'd need a month.
There is some difference between the prosecution and the defense. That is that we have not yet had a disclosure of the file, so we cannot judge the context of it. For that reason, I think we need some more time.
Suppose we gave you 2 weeks initially, let you look at the motion, and then if you need an additional 2 weeks, then of course we'd be
Well,
happy.
that's a good idea. Yes.
Okay.
We can agree to that.
Okay. Then you would respond to the motion, we'll say, by the Monday, which would be June 5th. Actually, that's a little bit more than, no?
Well, that will be fine.
No, wait a minute now. This is, no, wait, that's even too much time. Excuse me.
Yeah.
This is April 26. Let's count the days. You see what I have here? I have these colors, and I don't know that I fully understand them. Let me see.
Well, understand there's some problem in time.
Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Why don't we give you until Friday, May the 12th, to file your response?
At least to file a response with respect to the date.
Well, attempt to file a response to the motion that the prosecutor indicates that it's filing. Now, if you do not have enough time, that is, if after you receive the motion, you consider that you are unable to respond to it in that approximate 2-week period, then simply file a request for leave for an additional 2 weeks. It may be that when you receive their motion that you'll find that you can easily respond to it.
Yes, I do agree on that, but we have to see that, right?
Okay, so you may have then until May the 12th, and with the understanding that if after you receive the motion you need additional time, then you will advise the court prior to that time, and we will attempt to give you that additional time that you need.
Yes.
Mr. Vladimirov, do you intend on filing any preliminary motions for the defense?
Yes, we will file within the term of the 60 days motions we are considering but not decided yet. So we are not able to tell you at this stage which motions we will file.
The rules of procedure and evidence do give you 60 days, of
We
course, to
realize
file
that, yeah.
the motions.
Yeah, we will do this as quick as possible.
Okay. I understand Mr. Tadish has been in custody in Germany for how long? Since February of last year, so.
I really don't know.
Yes, but he is agree with that.
Okay. So then you will have 60 days to file the motions. In all likelihood, Mr. Vladimirov, we will schedule a pretrial conference or a status conference, so to speak, with counsel only, perhaps in 2 weeks. What would you think of that, fellow judges? Just to get a feel for where you are.
Right.
Perhaps by then you'll be in a better position to tell us what motions you'll be filing,
Well,
and when you might be filing them.
we would appreciate that if we could have such a meeting, because we are all dependent on the file we have not yet seen. So it merely is a practical problem, then I think it's a theoretical problem.
Let me count my days on my calendar again. We will set a status conference for May the 11th at 10 a.m. for the purpose of discussing the preliminary motions. We certainly hope, Mr. Vladimirov, that on that date you would be in a position to give a good indication of what motions you intend to file, if you can. Only so that we can schedule them accordingly,
yes.
but you're not required. You're correct. You do have the 60 days. Mr. Neiman, when do you expect that you will provide defense with the papers that accompany the indictment as required by the rules?
Yes, Your Honour. To answer Your Honour's question, we're expecting to provide the defence with a bundle of material today. There is some material that we have not provided because it's affected by our application, but apart from that, everything else will be supplied today. Your Honour, while I'm on my feet, I notice that when discussing the dates, Your Honour mentioned the 12th of May as the response date. I assume Your Honour meant the 12th of June.
Actually, we don't have the 12th of June. What I've done is to give counsel for the defense 2 weeks to respond, and if he needs more time, additional time. But from what you're telling me, you think that he really will need more time.
No, Your Honour, I'm sorry, there's a misunderstanding. It's just, I've noticed from this wonderful device which records the transcript that when mention of the dates were, I suggested that I would file my notice of motion by the 18th of May, and then Your Honour was discussing the times for the defence to response, and Your Honour mentioned the 12th of May, and I just for the record, I assume Your Honour means the 12th of June.
Yes, now I see what you mean. There might be some confusion about dates. Yes.
Well, do you need a month, Mr. Vladimirov, to respond to the government's motion? You're saying that that's what you're thinking, but I thought we agreed that until you really receive the motion, it's difficult for you to tell.
Well, what we are trying to say is that after we have received the motion, we will need 14 days and maybe an additional 14 days.
Okay.
That's it. And it just depends on the date the motion will be filed.
Mr. Neiman, then you'll be filing your motion on May 18th, and then counsel for the defense will have 14 days to respond to it. And I'll let someone else who is better with calendars compute those dates. 14 days after they file their response, their motion, which they're filing on May the 18th. If you need additional time after that 14 days, then of course you may ask for leave, and we will take a look at it at that date. Now, if someone has a calendar and they can do the computation better than I, Ms. Featherstone, perhaps you can come up with a date, 14 days after the 18th. Sure. Mr. Vladimirov, the court clerk tells me that your response then would be filed on June the 2nd. That's the response to the prosecutor's application. It will be filing on May 18th. And again, if you need additional time, then please advise the court.
We appreciate that.
And we have then set a status conference for May the 11th at 10 a.m. The purpose of the status conference would be for the lawyers to meet with the tribunal to discuss preliminary matters further.
That will be fine with us.
Is there anything else that we need to discuss preliminarily?
No, Your Honour, there's nothing from the point of view of the prosecution.
Defense, anything else?
No, Mr. President.
Fine. Now, is the prosecutor ready to proceed to trial?
Yes, Your Honour.
Defense?
We are, Mr. President.
Fine. The tribunal will not set a date for trial at this time. A trial date will be set after we resolve the motions. Of course, we're not certain at this point what motions we'll be receiving, but as soon as we receive the motions and the responses and resolve them, I will ask that the registrar set a date for trial. Are there any additional matters that need to be discussed?
Not from what.
Fine. Court is adjourned.